Please pray with me. Gracious God, minister to us, your people. Hearts are tender today. Minister comfort, minister encouragement, minister vision. May only truth be spoken, may only truth be heard, we ask. Amen. I think perhaps for many of us, especially those of us who are older, we have many memories that come to mind as we approach Remembrance Day. I come from Halifax, which was a military town, a Navy town, and when I grew up, Remembrance Day was taken very seriously. We had assemblies in our school that the same time and effort went into as our Christmas concerts. And I remember my first memory is of talking to my Uncle Neil, and he served in Normandy. And he was a real gentleman. I never heard a swear word or a cross word ever cross his mouth. And we were visiting, and I said to Uncle Neil, I says, what was it like being in the war? I probably would have only been about 7 or 8. And he kind of got a faraway look in his eyes, and he just kind of said, war is hell. And he kind of walked out, and I felt embarrassed. I felt like I'd done something wrong, but then I realized, of course, later, it wasn't about me. But what people I knew wouldn't talk about had the big impact on me. Around high school, I became friends with a buddy Gavin, and so every Remembrance Day I would go to the cenotaph with his mom and dad. They met during the war. His dad, Bud, served in a tank and was injured, and he fell in love with the nurse taking care of him, and so they were married, and he brought her back from England to Canada. I was always afraid of Bud. I didn't really like him. He was a very gruff guy, and he never said anything, and I was visiting the house all the time, and he'd just kind of grunt. But again, when we went to Remembrance Day services at the cenotaph in front of City Hall, I was shocked to see tears rolling down his cheeks. The only time I ever saw any vulnerability in the man. And yet, for probably 3 or 4 or 5 years, I witnessed that same experience. So it's a profound time. And it speaks to great sacrifice. And sacrifice, maybe it's never been in vogue, but it sure doesn't seem to be in vogue these days. I mean, just generally speaking, sacrifice is not something I get excited about. But really, what Jesus points out and what we know from experience and through history is that really everything that's truly valuable and meaningful in life requires sacrifice. If we have children, we sacrifice for them. If they need to get help or they need something that's hard to get, we'll do everything we can to get them that help and support, or die trying, right? And then as we grow up, we sacrifice for others and our parents. I have a nephew who left his job in Japan and everything there and came back to Canada to give his dad a kidney. And he had a rougher time after the transplant operation than his dad did, and he was kind of out of commission for a year. But we do We sacrifice for what's important, because without it, there's no meaning. And to love is to sacrifice. Now, sacrifice isn't being used by other people. Sometimes people use us and abuse us and control us, and we think we're sacrificing for love. And I often tell people, Jesus said, don't throw your pearls before swine. Don't be giving the best of yourself for people in situations that don't appreciate it and just trot over you. I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about the sacrifice where we're really trying to help and make a difference in a meaningful way. And love's sacrifice is always to lift up and to make a better world and to preserve life and to help this world be a kinder, fairer place. But the reality is that we're always in a struggle. We're always at war. We're always in a war of values. I mean, that's what that poem in Flanders Fields is talking about. So take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Field. There's always this struggle. Take up our quarrel with the foe. Or as Ephesians says, put on the whole armor of God so that you'll be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For our struggle is not against enemies of blood and flesh, which is what we usually think, but against cosmic powers of darkness found in high places. Evil exists as much as love does. There are dark spiritual energies and addictions that are always at war with the values of love. And sometimes they appear strongly in people and in nations. I think probably you can relate to the fact of how relieved I am that we don't have to live through another 4 years of Donald Trump. Right? But also how sobered I am that half the population of the United States voted for him, and more people voted for him this time than last time. That shows how wily, the wiles of the devil, that's what Ephesians talking about, how we can get sucked up in the negative energies. I mean, what was Trump all about? We all have the temptation to be about what Trump was about. What? Self first. Others are a threat. Never take responsibility. Never back down. A defense is a strong offense. We've got the right to do what we want to do, and the heck with everybody else. Those are values that can stumble us because they're a part of the dark side that is part of our divinity. We can love. We've got the divine love of God, but that same divinity has the dark side to it. Biden knows what I'm talking about today. He was fighting and will continue to fight for the soul of America. America, like all countries, is always in the balance as to what it will be and what it will become. And Biden knows we have evil powers that are a part of us, the dark side of our divinity. He calls this our darkest impulses. And he's calling America away from their darkest impulses to their better angels. And that's the challenge of life. And all the battles come down to a battle between the dark impulses and the better angels. And most wars throughout the history of the world have been started for reasons that are the darker impulses, the desire for more power, more territory. And those of us who are white and from European extraction, we've got to kind of relearn our history, because we grew up celebrating Christopher Columbus when the people who came and dominated Canada and the United States and put colonies all around the world. I mean, that was an unholy, evil alliance of a king and a queen and rulers who then used their armies to force what they wanted to happen, and were in league with pirates like Columbus, who went and extracted whatever they could from wherever they went like a virus. That's been the norm. But even so, we sacrifice, we honor the sacrifice of soldiers, most of whom throughout history have had no choice. They had to soldier for one reason or another. And yet, they didn't fight for king. Most soldiers in the history of this world have fought to protect their families, to provide for their families, and for the mates who they're fighting with. And that is rooted in their sense of love and honor and dignity and courage. And we lift up that beauty of divinity in the midst of so much evil. But we give thanks that Spirit is always at work. The world today is safer than it's ever been. 6,000 years ago, 150 people per 100,000 in this world were killed through violence. When the empires came in and created armies, they reduced that to 50 per 100,000. In the last century, with all the killing in World War I and II, it came down to 6 people per 100,000. So war is not inevitable. And in fact, we particularly honor the Second World War because we discovered the wisdom to move from the old ways of greed and power and control. After the First World War, which was to be the war to end all wars, the terms of the peace were so draconian. They wanted to extract every penny they could get out of Germany, and it created the hotbed of resentment, which was what Hitler was able to use to get the people to support him, to disband the parliament, and become the dictator he was. But after the Second World War, something new happened in the history of this world that's never happened before. Do you know what it is? Number one, instead of reparations to cripple Germany, the United States in today's dollars put $130 billion into rebuilding Europe, including Germany. Wow. You see, that's the Jesus way. You build up even the enemy, because the only solution to peace and prosperity is where everybody gets treated reasonably and fairly. Oh, not only that, for the first time in history, the country said, we can no longer let a single country do whatever they want in the name that they control their citizens. And so the Nuremberg courts were set up, and they've become the world criminal courts. And when the leaders of this world fully support them, as they will, then there won't be room for dictators to do the terrible things they do anymore. We believe in accountability between nations, which again is at the core of the teachings of Jesus, but never heard of before the Second World War. And Lester Pearson had that great vision of NATO and encouraged NATO to create peacekeeping as a primary function of our troops. And so, friends, Spirit is working. This world is getting better. And evil does not triumph. And contrary to often popular opinion, it's sacrifice and being fair and working for equality and moving beyond seeking revenge that creates prosperity and that creates peace. And so we give thanks for all the sacrifices made by people today. And we remember the words of Jesus, who said, there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And we make peace by responding to Christ's invitation to become friends. You are my friends when you do as I ask, and this is what I ask. Love one another. Love your enemy. Cooperation and friendship. That is the only pathway to peace for individuals and nations. Love in all its forms is the most powerful protection any of us have in this world. Thanks be to God.